Hey guys, it's Creepy Kirsty, and welcome to my first ever video. Remember, if you like this video, click on that subscribe button and turn on your bell notifications to get notified every time I upload a new video. First off, I want to apologize because my background is not complete. I'm getting a new wall unit to store all my horror movies on, and it's supposed to be right here behind me. But it's not here yet, and I was going to wait until I came to film this video, but then I realized that it wouldn't be here until later this month, and I don't even know how long it's going to take me to put everything together and store everything on it, and I just realized that I can't wait because it's very important to me to get this video out there as soon as possible, and I will tell you why in a second. So the reason that I'm even making this video in the first place is because as of filming this video, it is June 1st, and for those who don't know, June is Pride Month, and in this video, as I'm sure you can tell by the title, I'm going to be talking to you guys about LGBTQ plus representation in horror movies. As far back as from the 1940s to today, and we're going to talk about each part of the LGBTQ plus community and how they're represented in horror movies. And the reason this video is so important for me to make in the first place is because I'm a lesbian. And when I originally went searching on Google and YouTube for information to make this video, it took a while for me to do so. Because other than one documentary I found on YouTube called Monsters in the Closet, I wasn't able to find much on YouTube about LGBTQ plus representation in horror movies. And I also just want to make this video for all the LGBTQ plus people out there and let them know that they are not alone. And if you are LGBTQ plus and you're seeing this video and you need somebody to talk to, then I can be that person. All my social media links are right here on screen, and they'll be linked in the description box below. Anytime you need somebody to talk to, you can just hit me up. And as you guys can tell by the title of this video also, I will be telling you guys my coming out story, because my coming out story also involves a horror movie, and that will be at the end of the video. And I will also put a timestamp right here in case you just want to skip to that part of the video and hear my story. But I do hope that you stick around for the entire video as well. So sit back, relax, grab a snack, and enjoy a look into the history and modern day of LGBTQ plus representation in horror movies. All genres, including horror, have the ability to show not only what the world thinks of a subject, but also to influence the minds of the people who consume it. And while horror movies are adored and can reveal interesting things about what the world was scared of at the time it was produced, they also show us how flawed ways of thinking were in the discourse surrounding gay identity. People within the LGBTQ plus community are often misrepresented. Their sexualities and or gender identities cast them in a role of the other. In horror cinema, their gayness is often seen as something that should be feared, and something that makes a character evil or go crazy. In 2020, our thinking on gayness and the LGBTQ plus community has changed significantly, and yet horror movies still depict LGBTQ plus characters and gay people as different, and people who should be feared and kept in a box. Gay men in horror are often misrepresented as though their gayness is a monster within them, or something that drives them insane. An excellent example is 1985's A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge. The homoerotic undercurrent in Freddy's Revenge is so strong that sometimes the subtext feels as though it has become canon. One of the most famous lines from the movie is Freddy Krueger whispering, "I need you, Jesse. You've got the body and I've got the brains." However, every time Jesse pauses with that homoerotic undercurrent, Freddy comes out of him and uses him to kill. There is a correlation between Jesse's sexuality and violence, which implies that some of the aggression is associated with homosexuality or that gay identity is something to be fought. There is a tendency for people to blame the problematic themes seen in horror films on the eras in which the films were made. However, even in contemporary horror movies with homoerotic undertones, the idea that gay identity must also be violent reappears. For example, in 2019's The Lighthouse, there is a scene with an almost tender moment in which two of the male leads lean in for a kiss, but instead of allowing the moment to remain tender, they end up fighting and swearing at each other. While the homoerotic undertone remains intact, as the wrestling is very guttural, it also solidified the theme that gayness must be fought and resisted in horror. In addition, trans people are not only cast as the other, but transsexuality itself is explained incorrectly. We see in 1980s Dressed to Kill a character shown as having two different sides, a male and a female side. The female side is the film's killer. It's always this story of they want to be a woman, but their male side is awakened by the sexuality of a woman. The female side has to reprise that. So they have to kill the object of that attraction, of the thing that is reigniting their male side. The character of Buffalo Bill from 1991's The Silence of the Lambs is another who suggests that being trans somehow equates to being a killer. In the movie, when Buffalo Bill is denied sex reassignment surgery, he then goes out and dissects women, taking their skin to make a woman suit. This reading implies that people who surgically change their gender are, in one way or another, stealing from people by trying to change their bodies. Another example comes from the 1960 classic Alfred Hitchcock film Psycho. Most people nowadays realize that not all gay men are effeminate, mama's boys, hate all women, and cross-dress. And they certainly don't think that all gay men are serial killers. But back in 1960, many audiences would have conflicted with some or even all of those traits in their general characterization of homosexuals. Alfred Hitchcock chose Anthony Perkins to play the role of Norman Bates. As a soft-spoken, slightly effeminate young man, he is also a deranged mama's boy who killed women. It's hard not to attribute the character's sexuality to part of a larger dangerous pathology. Likewise, another Hitchcock character in another one of his films, Rebecca, sees her villainy exacerbated by her homosexuality. Another example comes from the 2018 film Lizzie, which features an interesting take on lesbian relationships. The new take on the old tale includes Leslie Borden taking part in a romantic relationship with Bridget Sullivan. The relationship isn't played up only for audience's pleasure, but also adds an additional element to the story. Lizzie is not a killer because of her sexuality, but because people that threaten to hurt her and her lover Another shining example for lesbian inclusion is 2018's Unfriended the Dark Web. In this movie, two lesbian characters, Nari and Serena, are victims of the horrors of the movie, but not because of their sexuality, because they just so happen to be a lesbian couple in a horror movie, with each of these movies is problematic and we clearly still have a long way to go before they're more inclusive to their audiences. It should be noted that such films should not be discounted. Often, movies like these are some of the first times that members of the LGBTQ+ community get to see themselves not only being portrayed on screen, but as lead characters. The inclusion of gay villains is fine, but their gayness, their sexuality, should not be the reason that they're the villains. It causes issues. We need to start including LGBTQ+ characters in more proper ways. The lack of proper LGBTQ+ characters is harmful in many ways due to social stigmas and discrimination. We need to start showing them that we're not monsters to be feared, that we, like them, are people who deserve to love and be loved in return. It all started back on October 26, 2018. I was doing my first ever 31 Days of Horror when I decided that I was going to make a list of 31 movies that I hadn't seen yet. And the 26th movie on that list was Tim Burton's Sweeney Todd, starring Johnny Depp and Helena Bonham Carter. Within 5 minutes of watching the movie, I knew that it was going to become one of my top favorite horror movies of all time. And it still is to this day, and I became obsessed with it. I was watching clips and reviews of the movie online for days after watching it. On October 30th, 2018, the day before Halloween, it was around 10:30 or 11 p.m. and I had just gotten home because I was doing some community service hours for school. I was working on one of my mom's friend's haunted houses. And I heated up some pizza and went upstairs and decided to watch some YouTube before going to bed. And I decided to watch some more clips from Sweeney Todd. And there was one clip I was watching, and Helena Bonham Carter as Mrs. Lovett was on screen, and my heart started beating out of my chest, and I felt butterflies in my stomach, and after I realized what I was feeling, I recognized those feelings. They were the same feelings I've had in the past when I saw a cute boy and was falling in love with him. And it was at that moment that I realized that I was falling in love with her. And I remember saying to myself in my head, oh my god, I think I'm bisexual. A girl cannot love another girl this much and be straight. Also, just FYI, you're going to hear me say I'm bisexual a lot in this video because at the time that's what I thought I was, and I thought that it was only right to tell you guys that. But I now know that I am a lesbian. But as shocked as I was in that moment, I also knew that I didn't want to stay in the closet. I definitely didn't want to announce it to the whole world yet, but I at least knew that I wanted to tell my close friends and family. And I knew that they would be accepting of me because my parents and my sisters had all seen movies and TV shows with gay couples in them, and they didn't have a problem with it. And I remember my mom specifically said that it doesn't matter, love is love. But I wanted to let Halloween pass by first. So I thought that I'd write it out in a letter and I'll give it to my mom on the 1st of November. But I actually do still have the letter, and I'll insert a picture of it right here. But I wrote the letter that immediately right after I started figuring out that I was falling in love with her. And it actually, falling in love with her actually made me realize that this was not my first time having a crush on a girl, and that I've had multiple crushes on multiple girls since I was 13 years old. But I didn't know what being gay or lesbian or bisexual was until I was about 15 years old. So back then, the thought of me actually being in love with those girls didn't cross my mind, no matter how strong my affections were on them at the time. But I wrote all that in the letter, so I'm not going to explain it all here. So the next day comes and I go to school, and I just remember still being in so much shock from the night before. I almost ran out of both my period 1 and 2 classes crying, but I didn't. I wasn't crying because I was embarrassed or ashamed or anything like that, but because when you first find out something like that about yourself, it's a big shock even to you. And it can make you very emotional, because when you first discover something like that about yourself, you have to accept yourself before you can expect others to accept you. And I was just starting to accept myself the night before and that morning. And trust me when I say that accepting myself was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do in my life. I didn't hate myself for being the way I was, but it was still extremely hard. But I tried my best to hide it. I tried my best to make it look like nothing happened and that I was 100% okay. But I wasn't able to do that for long. At lunchtime, I sat at a table in the cafeteria, still in shock, and just thinking to myself about the fact that I was bisexual, and that I was in love with a woman, and that it was my first time. But it wasn't until my sister and her friends came and sat with me that I had to excuse myself, because I couldn't hold in my emotions anymore. And also, I couldn't keep it a secret anymore. So I took my lunch and I went and sat in the hallway where no one else could see me, and I finally just let all my emotions out and I cried. I then also decided that I was going to tell one of my best friends at the time, because I was going to DM her on Instagram and everything, because she was a lesbian. And so I knew that she would understand, and that's why I wanted her to be the first to know. I basically just told her everything I've already told you guys about the movie and the letter and all that stuff. And I'm telling you that after I told her, even though it was over on Instagram DM, it felt like this huge weight had been lifted off my chest. And I honestly think that telling her and having her support was what helped me accept myself. So the rest of the day went by and I got home and I started getting ready for Halloween. I put on my costume. I was Michael Myers that year. And I just continued acting like my usual self, as if nothing has happened. But inside, I was a little afraid of my family's reaction. And like I said before, I knew that my family would be accepting, but the thought of exactly what I was going to say to them and what they were going to say to me was still lingering in the back of my head. And honestly, a lot of my family members still don't know to this day. I don't think any of my grandparents know, and some of my aunts and uncles and cousins don't know to this day. So I myself still have some coming out to do. But anyway, the night passed and it was the next morning, and there that letter was on my desk, waiting for me to take it downstairs and give it to my mom. So I got myself ready for the day and I took it downstairs with me, and I was downstairs before my mom was that morning. So I made my lunch and then just sat on the couch with my sister waiting for my mom to come down. And when she did come down, she went to let the dogs out, and I went up to her and gave her the letter and asked her to read it while she was outside with the dogs. And she did, and my sister asked me about it, and I just said that the reason why I had to leave the cafeteria yesterday was in that letter. And so my mom then came back in, and I asked her if she read it, and she said yes. And then my sister asked what was in the letter, and my mom said Kirsty thinks that she might be bisexual. And my sister was just like, oh, okay. And she didn't ask who it was, and I said it was Helena Bonham Carter and Sweeney Todd. And my mom just told me that she accepts me, and she also just asked me if I was sure that I was falling in love with her and that I didn't just love her as an actress. She just wanted to be sure. And I told her, yes, the feelings that I was having for her were the same feelings I'd had for boys and other girls in the past. I then asked my mom if she could tell my dad and stepdad for me. I knew that my dad would accept me, but I still just wanted her to tell him. As for my stepdad, on the other hand, I was a little more afraid of his reaction because he has some LGBTQ plus members in his family, and he just gets really uncomfortable talking about them and their identities. So even though I didn't think he'd have a negative reaction towards me, I was still scared at the very off chance that he would. And she told both of them, and the next day she told me that they both accept me, but even though at the time I really was starting to accept myself, it took me a long time to come out to my other friends and on social media. Maybe not as long as some other people, but for me it was a long time. It wasn't until about a month later that I had fully accepted myself and came out as bisexual to my friends and on Instagram and other social media. And for about the next year and a half, I identified as bisexual. And for the last few months now, I've identified as a lesbian. Thank you guys so much for listening to my story. It means the world to me to be able to express that I am who I am and that I'm part of it to the entire world. So guys, this is going to be it for today's video. Remember, if you want to reach out to me personally, all my social media links are in the description box below. Thank you so much for listening to my story and the representation of LGBTQ plus people in horror movies. And the next time I see you guys, I will have a complete background. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, then don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on your bell notifications. That way you get notified every single time I post a new video. Until next time, guys.